Hey folks, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the original Crysis. Now, this game came out about 10 years ago, and on its release it totally split the community down the middle. Some absolutely loved the fact that it was a graphical powerhouse, that its advanced physics engine made a lot of things possible. Others just seen it as another run-of-the-mill shooter that required a PC that was far too expensive for the average gamer to even consider running. Now, personally, I loved the original Crysis, and I didn't have a monster PC. I played it on a laptop and I spent quite a lot of the time searching through online forums and tweaking the game to actually get it to run, but nevertheless I absolutely loved it. So I think today it's only fair that we test it on a GPU that's equally as polarising as the game. I'm of course talking about the GTX 1050TI. Now, if you know anything about my videos on this channel, I've kind of gave it a bit of a hard time lately. On its release, a lot of the pricing was so inflated that it just made absolutely no sense. But thankfully the pricing is starting to trickle down, so what I've got here is a Gigabyte GTX 1050Ti, which you can pick up online for around about £130. Now, I'm not going to say that at this price point it's a bargain, but it does have its uses. So let's see if this budget GPU, which is equal parts darling and divider of the PC community, can run this almost decade-old game at absolutely maxed out settings. So to do this test, we're going to be using the usual game rig of a Core i5 4590, 3.7 GHz, 8GB of DDR3 RAM, and running on Windows 7. As you can see, we've maxed out all the settings here, and I've got to say that even 10 years on, this game still looks fantastic. Sure, it's not got some of the polish that some new titles or even its successors have, but it still looks like a AAA title. In fact, I've seen a few titles released even over the last few years that still don't really stand up to this game. For the most part, Crysis, it is generally your average FPS affair, especially if you've came to gaming only in the last 10 years or so, but at its time, I still think it had a few tricks up its sleeve that differentiated it from the competition. The Nano Suit is a great tool at your disposal, and it allows you to really mix it up in gunfights. Like its spiritual predecessor FarCry, the one bugbear I do have with Crysis is that the first half of the game it totally eclipses the second half. But in perfect honesty, there's probably more than enough in the first half of the game for you to get your enjoyment out of, especially at the few pounds that it costs these days. So onto the GPU, we've kept everything at stock clocks, and overall it produces a fairly healthy frame rate even with all that anti-aliasing turned up. Over the course of an hour or so's gameplay, we averaged around about 52 FPS. Now this really puts things into perspective. This card, it is realistically a budget card. But if you were getting performance like this at 1080p with everything maxed out back in 2007, your mind would have been absolutely blown. And while at total max settings it might not hit that 60 FPS mark, if we dial back some of that anti-aliasing a bit, we can easily get the average to hover well over 60 FPS. Now, playing through this game again, it just sort of reminded me that it's kind of became that game that reviewers just like to benchmark. They don't really get into it, but if you take off the reviewing glasses for a minute, you'll really find a gem of an FPS under there. With that said folks, that's what I'm about to do, so thanks for watching this quick look at Crysis 1 on the GTX 1050Ti. I'm away to slip back into that Nano Suit. If you liked it, use those thumbs, you can leave a comment down below, and if you've not done so already, consider subscribing, and I'll see you again soon.